Today's episode is actually inspired by a really great question that someone asked me in a recent webinar. She said, I get why Slimming World and Weight Watchers doesn't work for me anymore. You've explained the hormone stuff, but I'm confused about how it works for some women over 40 still. And I thought, yeah, that is exactly the kind of question that needs some unpacking. Because when you feel like you're doing all the right things, maybe even following the exact same plan as someone else, but your body doesn't seem to be responding in the same way that theirs is, it can leave you feeling really frustrated. Like, what's wrong with me? Why does her body shrink and mine just doesn't budge? So if you've ever found yourself in that place, wondering why it feels so much harder now, why nothing seems to work anymore, and why some women your age still seem to get results on these diets while you're stuck spinning your wheels, this episode is for you. We're going to talk about why diets like Slimming World and Weight Watchers can work, specifically for younger women and also some women who are older, what's going on in midlife that changes things for the rest of us, and why some women over 40 still respond well, and what that actually tells us, and why, even if these diets do seem to work, I still don't think they're a healthy long-term option. And then I'll share what I do recommend instead, something that actually supports your metabolism, your hormones, your energy, and crucially, your long-term health. So if you've been feeling stuck, confused, or just tired of trying the same thing over and over again, let's take the pressure off, make sense of what's really going on in your body, and talk about what will actually help you move forwards. So let's start by taking a step back, because before we talk about why these diets stop working for many women over 40, we need to understand why they often do work in the earlier stages of life. So picture this, you're in your 20s or your early 30s, you decide that you want to drop a little bit of weight. So you join Slimming World or Weight Watchers, and within a few weeks, the number on the scales start to move. You might cut out some snacks, you might swap some regular meals for free foods, or load up your plate with pasta and jacket potatoes and still somehow lose weight, even if you're not particularly eating clean or nourishing foods. And that's because at that age, your body is generally far more forgiving. Your hormones, estrogen, insulin, cortisol, thyroid, they're likely still fairly balanced. Your metabolism is responsive, your muscle mass is higher. Basically, your body is operating with a lot more resilience. It can handle more ups and downs without tipping into chaos. So if you eat a little less and you move a little more, your body often says, okay, sure, I'll drop some weight. There's also something called metabolic flexibility. And when you're younger, you do tend to have a lot more of it. And that means that your body can efficiently switch between burning carbs and burning fat for energy. So even if a plan is very carb heavy, which often Slimming World and Weight Watchers can be, your body can handle it. It processes those meals, it keeps your blood sugar fairly stable, and it still finds a way to tap into stored fat when you're in a calorie deficit. I want to pause here and say, just because a diet works doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. You might lose weight, but if that's happening through chronic undereating, blood sugar crashes, or a lot of emotional restriction, that's not exactly a win for long-term health. But in those earlier years, your body tends to be a bit more adaptable. It's not that the diet is amazing, it's that your body is amazing. Your body is capable of dealing with it. Also, younger bodies can handle the stress of dieting much better. Let's be honest, cutting calories, avoiding certain foods, counting sins or points, it's stressful. but when your nervous system is more robust, your sleep is better, and your hormones are still cycling regularly, your system can absorb that stress a little more easily. And when that stress does show up through fatigue or mood swings or irritability or feeling cold all the time, it's often just brushed off as normal, normal side effects of dieting. You're probably also moving more without even realizing it, walking to and from work, going out with friends, staying up late, but bouncing back the next morning. You've got energy to burn. That all helps create the kind of calorie deficit that these diet programs rely on. So yes, the weight loss might be real, but the reason it works often comes down to this simple equation: calorie deficit plus youthful hormonal resilience. And that equals short-term success. Now, it's not that the program is magic. It's not that you were better back then. It's just that your body was more able to cope with the demands being placed on it. And because it worked once, it's easy to assume that it's going to work again. So fast forward 10, 15 years, and when your body no longer responds in the same way, it feels incredibly frustrating, like something must be wrong with you. But nothing's wrong. What's happening is that your body has changed. You're not working with the same physiology anymore. And the approach that once gave you results is now pushing your system in the opposite direction. So let's talk about what actually changes, because this is the piece so many women are missing. You're not broken. You haven't lost control, but your body isn't running the same software that it was in your 20s or 30s. And, if no one tells you that, you end up stuck in the cycle of blame and confusion. So let's break it down. Hormones start to shift, and that changes everything. One of the biggest changes in midlife is the gradual decline in estrogen and progesterone, especially as you move into perimenopause. These two hormones do so much more than just regulate your cycle. Estrogen supports insulin sensitivity, which means it helps your body to move sugar out of your bloodstream and into your cells to be used for energy. When estrogen starts to decline, your insulin sensitivity tends to drop with it. And that means that your body may now struggle to handle carbohydrates the way that it used to. Blood sugar spikes more easily and crashes harder, and you're more likely to store those carbs as fat, particularly around the belly. And progesterone, on the other hand, is calming and soothing, and it helps with sleep, stress, and fluid balance. When it drops, which often happens before estrogen does, you might notice worse sleep, more anxiety, and a tendency to retain water. And it also affects how well regulated your appetite is, which is why many women find they suddenly feel hungrier or have more intense cravings, especially in that second half of the cycle. So now you've got fluctuating hormones, a body that doesn't handle food as well, and a nervous system that is more reactive. And you're trying to fix all of this by eating less. So no wonder it doesn't work. Now, you also naturally lose muscle at this age unless you're actively fighting to keep it. And this one is huge. It doesn't get talked about enough. From around your mid-30s, you start to lose muscle mass every decade, a process called sarcopenia. And muscle is key to maintaining your metabolic rate. Muscle is metabolically active. The more of it you have, the more energy your body burns at rest, even when you're just watching Netflix or sleeping. So if you're not strength training, not eating enough protein and you're doing diet after diet without supporting your muscle, you're slowly chipping away at one of your body's main calorie burning engines. And that means that when you try something like Slimming World or Weight Watchers again in your 40s, your body doesn't respond in the same way. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're working with less metabolic capacity. Now let's talk cortisol. This is your main stress hormone, and while it's totally normal and helpful in short bursts, chronic stress, the kind that builds up over years of parenting and career pressure and emotional baggage and lack of sleep and, yes, repeated dieting, this can cause all sorts of chaos. When cortisol is high for long periods of time, it can promote fat storage, especially around the belly. It disrupts your blood sugar, messes with your sleep, affects your thyroid, and it leaves you feeling wired but tired. And you might find yourself craving sugar and caffeine just to get through the day. And then you feel guilty for not sticking to the plan. And here's the irony: going back on a restrictive diet just adds more stress. Your body doesn't see calorie cutting as healthy, it sees it as a threat. So now, instead of letting go of weight, your body holds on tighter because from its perspective, survival is the priority. Now let's talk about your thyroid, because this might be slowing down, and so is your digestion. So another really important piece here, and this little gland is like your metabolic thermostat. It helps to regulate your energy, your temperature, your digestion, your mood, and your weight. And in midlife, thyroid function can become less efficient, especially if you've been under chronic stress, you have a history of undereating, or if you're low in key nutrients like iron, selenium, iodine, or zinc. And even mild thyroid dysfunction, not enough to be picked up as abnormal on a basic blood test, it can still make weight loss really tough. And at the same time, digestion tends to slow down. You might notice more bloating, constipation, or food intolerances. And that affects how you absorb nutrients, and it can leave you feeling pretty sluggish, puffy and inflamed, even if you're technically eating healthy. And that sluggish digestion feeds back into how your body handles food and burns energy. It all connects. And then we also need to mention perimenopause. It really amplifies all of this. This can last anywhere from 2 to 10 years before menopause actually hits. And for many women, it begins in their late 30s or early 40s, long before your periods stop. And during this time, hormone levels can fluctuate wildly from month to month, even week to week. Some cycles you might ovulate and some you won't. And that changes your hormone ratios, your mood, your energy, your sleep, and your ability to tolerate stress. And you might feel like a different person from one day to the next. And, trying to navigate that roller coaster with a rigid diet plan, it's not only ineffective, it's exhausting. And then we need to talk about chronic inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction, because this can slow everything down, even when you're doing everything right. So this is the final piece that I really want you to hear. Even if you're eating well and you're moving regularly, managing your stress, if you've spent years on the diet hamster wheel, your body may be dealing with low-grade inflammation and tired mitochondria. These are the little powerhouses inside your cells that help you to make energy and burn fat. It's where fat burning happens, and it's not talked about enough. Chronic inflammation makes your body more resistant to change. It can increase insulin resistance, disrupt hormones, and interfere with how your cells respond to food and exercise and even sleep. And when your mitochondria aren't functioning optimally, your metabolism slows down, not just in terms of weight, but energy, focus, and vitality. So when a woman tells me that she's doing everything right and nothing's happening, this is often what is going on under the surface. It's not about willpower. It's about the systems in the body that need support, not starvation. To sum all of that up, you're not failing. Your body isn't broken. It's just that in midlife, everything changes, and those changes require a different approach. What worked in your 20s may no longer serve you, not because you're doing it wrong, but because your body has evolved and it deserves a strategy that evolves with it. So by now, you're probably thinking, okay, I get why these diets stop working for a lot of women in their 40s, but why do they still work for some? Because that's the bit that can feel the most frustrating. You've got a friend or a colleague who's the same age, same stage of life, and she signs up to Weight Watchers or a similar diet, she sticks to it, and bam, the weight drops off. And it's so easy in that moment to go into comparison mode, to think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do that? Am I just lazy? Am I too emotional around food? Do I just not want it badly enough? And that's what you'll hear out there. That's what a lot of gurus would tell you. But here's the truth. There's usually a lot more going on under the surface than what you see on the scales or in someone's before and after photo. So let's unpack this. Some women over 40 do still lose weight on these diets. That's not a myth. But the key difference is that they're often starting from a different baseline physiologically. For example, they haven't spent years dieting. If someone hasn't been on and off diets for decades, their metabolism might still be reasonably intact. Their body hasn't been pushed into that chaotic stress state from years of under eating, binging, restricting, and starting over every Monday. So when they do create a calorie deficit, even on a carb-heavy plan, their body may well respond because it hasn't been taught to resist change yet. This is so important to understand. Two women can eat the exact same meal plan. One gets results, the other doesn't, because of their metabolic history. It's not about effort, it's about context. Another reason is because they may still have a decent insulin sensitivity and cortisol regulation. For some women, especially those who have managed stress well, or they aren't dealing with major blood sugar issues, their bodies are still fairly responsive. They might be sleeping well, digesting food properly, balancing their blood sugars without even really thinking about it, and they're not battling the same internal resistance. So yes, if they go on Slimming Well, they cut their sins and they eat their jacket potatoes and Miller Lights, their body might respond because it can tolerate it. But again, that doesn't mean yours should be able to. Different starting points, different systems, different stress loads. Now, another reason is they might not yet be deep into perimenopause, or they might be on HRT, for example. Just because someone is 42 or 45 doesn't mean that they're in the thick of hormonal change. Some women's hormones start fluctuating earlier, some later, some are already on HRT and getting that hormonal support, some aren't. So again, it's not a level playing field. You might be comparing your body in full perimenopausal chaos to someone else's that's still coasting along with a reasonably stable hormone level. And even if you're the same age, your internal environment could be completely different. Another reason is, they're very compliant and they're getting temporary surface level results. Now, this is where I want to gently challenge the assumption that it worked. It doesn't mean that it worked well. Yes, some women over 40 get results in Slimming World or Weight Watchers because they're following the plan to the letter. They're tracking religiously, they're staying within their points, maybe they're skipping meals if they've overdone it. But just because the weight comes off doesn't mean that everything is working underneath. What we don't see until we look closer is what's happening to their mood, energy, digestion, their skin, their sleep, their muscle mass, their cravings. We don't see whether they're freezing cold all the time or snapping at their kids or crying in the bathroom because they're so hungry and exhausted, but they feel like they should be happy because the number on the scales is going down. We also don't see the long-term impact, the bone density loss, the thyroid slowdown, the loss of muscle that makes it harder to maintain that weight down the line. And so many women who succeed on these plans end up gaining the weight back and more within a year or two. And that's not because they failed, it's because the plan wasn't sustainable. So what can we take from all of this? Yes, there are women who still respond to traditional calorie-focused diets in midlife, but they're usually the ones with minimal metabolic wear and tear, strong hormonal regulation, and the kind of nervous system that can tolerate the stress of restriction, at least for a while. Okay, so now that we've talked about why these diets might work for some people and why they often stop working in midlife, I want to be really honest about something. Even if Slimming World or Weight Watchers do work for you in the short term, I still don't think they're a healthy option. And I say that with total respect for anyone who has tried them or even had success with them. You know, this isn't about shaming those choices. You know, we've all been there doing the best that we can with the information we have at the time. But I've worked with hundreds of women and I've seen the damage that these kinds of plans can do physically, mentally, and emotionally, especially when we stick with them for too long or we keep going back to them after every slip. So let's break it down. First of all, they focus on calories or points, not the quality of food. At the end of the day, both Slimming World and Weight Watchers are rooted in the same old school belief that weight loss is all about eating less and exercising more. It's a numbers game. Sins, points, red days, green days, but there's very little conversation about what your body actually needs to thrive. You could eat an entire day's worth of food made up of diet yogurts, low-calorie bread, pasta, fruit, and Miller Lights and still be on plan. But your body needs more than that. It needs protein, fiber, healthy fats, micronutrients, and variety. It needs foods that nourish your cells, not just fills your stomach. So when the focus is on how little you eat or how little you can get away with eating, or how much volume you can consume while staying within your points, you end up undernourished, not just underfed. And they also tend to be very carb heavy and often encourage ultra processed products. Things like free pasta, low fat cheese, diet drinks, 0-calorie syrups, light spreads, meal replacement bars. It's a lot of processed, low nutrient foods that keep you in the habit of eating things that aren't particularly satisfying or supportive. And in midlife, when your insulin sensitivity is lower and your blood sugar needs more careful handling, this is not the time to be relying on low-fat yogurts and sweeteners to carry you through the day. It might fill your points, but it's not fueling your body. Now, another bugbear of mine is that there's no education about hormones or muscle or long-term health. And this is really important. No one's teaching you how to support your hormone health. No one's talking about why building and maintaining muscle becomes essential after 40. There's zero emphasis on protein quality, stress management, sleep hygiene, or gut health. No support around what to do when your cycle starts to change or how to respond when your usual tactics stop working. It's just go back to basics, stick to the plan. But the basics aren't enough when your biology is shifting underneath you. And that can leave you feeling like you're the problem, like you're doing it wrong, when really the plan just isn't built for the stage of life that you're in. Now, another key frustration of mine is that it encourages the all or nothing thinking and that guilt around food. If you've ever had a weekend off plan and felt like you had to make up for it the next day, you'll know exactly what I mean. These programs often create a reward and punishment relationship with food. You're either being good or you've blown it. You're either on it or you've fallen off the wagon. And that kind of thinking disconnects you from your body. It makes you ignore hunger cues, override cravings, and feel like you need permission to eat something simply because you want it. Food becomes something to manage or control, not something to enjoy or trust yourself around. And that's exhausting. I'm exhausted just talking about it, especially when you've been stuck in that cycle for years. Now, critically, these types of diets don't address the real reason the weight was gained in the first place. Most women don't gain weight in midlife just because they were lazy or they let themselves go. It's usually the result of chronic stress, hormonal shifts, burnout, poor sleep, gut issues, blood sugar crashes, thyroid dysfunction, inflammation, years of nutrient depletion. But none of that is addressed in these plans. There's no space for why the weight gain happened. And without understanding the root cause, it's very hard to create sustainable change. You can't out willpower a body that's in survival mode. Until those deeper issues are addressed, you'll be fighting the same battle over and over again. These diets, they don't support body confidence, self-trust, or long-term change. And this one is so frustrating. These plans might offer short-term motivation, weekly weigh-ins, gold stars, group praise, but they don't build self-trust. They don't teach you how to connect with your body, respond to its needs, or develop a calm, confident relationship with food. It becomes about following someone else's rules rather than learning what your body thrives on. And for so many women, this leads to years of yo-yoing. One good week, one bad week, on the plan, off the plan, losing weight, gaining it back, feeling good, then feeling guilty over and over again. And, these cycles, they can actually worsen your metabolism as well as your confidence. And it results in an increase in weight over time. And here's the bit that no one talks about. The more times you go through that cycle, you restrict, you lose weight, you regain, the more you wear down your metabolic system. You lose muscle, your stress response gets heightened, your thyroid slows, your insulin resistance worsens. So yes, these diets might work once or twice, but every time you go back, they get a little bit less effective. And eventually you find yourself eating less than ever and still not seeing results because the body is just done. That's the metabolic damage that I see in so many women that I've worked with over the years. It's not visible on the outside right away, but it shows up in your symptoms, your well-being, your hormones. And the real cost is that it makes you feel like you failed when really it's the diet that just wasn't built to support you in the first place. So yes, even if these diets work for some women, I believe they come at a cost. And for most women in midlife, that cost is just too high. Your body deserves more than a quick fix. It deserves nourishment, strength, balance, and respect. So now that we've peeled back all the layers, why diets like Slimming World and Weight Watchers work for some but not for others, why they often stop working in midlife, and the hidden costs even when they do work, let's talk about what to do instead, because I know how easy it is to get stuck in frustration. You feel like nothing's worked, and all the advice out there just tells us to eat less, move more, cut carbs, or try harder. And when you are trying, when you're eating well, you're doing all the right things, it feels like you must be missing something. And you are. But what you're missing isn't willpower or discipline. It's a strategy that's aligned with your physiology. So let's reframe this. Instead of asking, how can I lose weight? Let's ask, how can I support my metabolism, my hormones, and my long-term health, so that weight loss becomes a natural byproduct of a well-functioning body? Because when you focus on getting the body working better, instead of just forcing it to shrink, everything changes. So what does that look like in practice? Well, let's start with blood sugar balance. This is the foundation. When your blood sugar is swinging up and down all day from skipping meals or low protein breakfasts or high carb snacks or caffeine on an empty stomach, it increases a constant state of stress inside the body. And that makes it really hard to burn fat, balance hormones, or feel calm and energized. So the first thing that I support women to do is stabilize blood sugar with meals that are built around protein, healthy fats, fiber, and slow carbs. Not to be perfect, not to restrict, but to fuel your body in a way that helps your energy stay steady, your mood more balanced, your cravings quieter, and your metabolism supported. This alone can feel like a game changer. Next, we think about prioritizing protein and muscle retention. After 40, protein becomes a non-negotiable, not just for weight, but for mental health, bone density, and hormone function. We also need to be thinking about building or at least maintaining muscle, especially since we naturally start to lose it over time. And again, this isn't about looking toned. This is about preserving your metabolic rate, your strength, your blood sugar balance, and your longevity. And that might mean shifting from hours of cardio or HIIT training to more strength-based movements, or simply increasing your protein intake to support recovery and muscle maintenance. This is the kind of shift that builds resilience, not just weight loss. Next, we want to think about supporting your stress response and your nervous system. You cannot underestimate the impact of stress, not just emotional stress, but physiological stress from undereating and lack of sleep and over-exercising or even gut issues. In midlife, the body becomes more sensitive to stress and your cortisol response becomes louder, which means that fat loss becomes harder, even if you're doing everything right, until you start calming the nervous system. This could look like 7 to 8 hours of sleep consistently, eating regularly instead of fasting until noon, walking outside, grounding, breath work, setting better boundaries around your time and energy, taking rest seriously, not as a luxury, but as an essential fat loss tool. This might sound basic, but it's powerful. When the nervous system feels safe, the body becomes responsive again. Now, we also have to think about liver and gut support, the behind the scene heroes. No one talks about this in the diet world, but your liver and your gut are essential players in your metabolism and hormone balance. Your liver processes excess hormones, clears out toxins, and helps to regulate blood sugars. Your gut affects everything from inflammation and nutrient absorption to mood, cravings, and even estrogen levels. So if you've got bloating, constipation, reflux, or sluggish digestion, that's not a minor issue. That's a metabolic roadblock. A truly supportive approach helps to nourish and repair these systems, not ignore them. And of course, we have to think about long-term health, not just short-term fat loss. Ultimately, what we want isn't just weight loss. We want energy, we want confidence, strength, a sense of ease in our body. We want to age well, to stay sharp, strong, active. We want to be able to go for long walks, travel, play with our grandkids, lift heavy shopping, sleep deeply, and, not have to think about food all day, every day. That's the real goal. And when you focus on health first, metabolism, hormones, digestion, energy, weight loss becomes easier because it's happening in a body that's functioning properly. You're not forcing it, you're freeing it. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yes, this is the approach I've been craving, you're not alone and you don't have to try and figure it out all on your own. There are 2 ways that I can help you take the next step. The first is my free masterclass where I walk you through the exact reasons why your body feels stuck and what it actually needs to lose weight in a sustainable, healthy way. It's completely free and it's going to help everything that we've talked about today. So click the link in the show notes to save your space. The second way that I can help is with my 5-day metabolism reset challenge. This is a really practical, gentle way to get started. It's 5 days of small shifts that calm your nervous system, support your hormones, and kickstart fat loss without cutting calories or doing anything extreme. If you're ready to ditch the diet cycle and actually feel like yourself again with more energy, better sleep, fewer cravings, and steady progress that doesn't bounce back, these are 2 really solid places to start. All right. Let's take a moment. We've covered a lot today. We've looked at why diets like Slimming World or Weight Watchers tend to work better in your 20s and 30s because your body's more hormonally and metabolically resilient at that age. We talked about all the shifts that happen in midlife, from declining estrogen and progesterone to rising cortisol, muscle loss, thyroid changes, and gut sluggishness, and why those changes mean that your old strategies just don't work the way that they used to. And we've also looked at why these diets do still work for some women over 40 and how that can often come down to their unique metabolic history and hormonal state, not because they're doing more than you or they were doing it better. And we also dug into the real cost of these plans, even when they appear to work. And most importantly, we talked about what does work, how a smarter, more compassionate, more health-focused approach to weight loss that actually aligns with your body's needs right now is so impactful. One that supports your hormones and your metabolism and your future. So if you're walking away from this episode feeling seen, or maybe even a little bit emotional, or maybe just relieved, that's a good thing. It means something in you is waking up and saying, this makes sense now. And that's the start of everything. Because once you stop blaming yourself, once you stop thinking that you're the problem, you finally get to use your energy to move forwards instead of staying stuck in the same loop. If you want my help, remember you can watch my free masterclass and it'll expand on everything that we've talked about today and give you a clear roadmap forwards. Or if you're ready to take real action, you can join my 5-day metabolism reset challenge. It's practical, empowering, and it will show you what's possible when you stop dieting and start nourishing. The links to both are in the description or the show notes, and I would love to support you there. In the meantime, be kind to yourself. You haven't failed, your body isn't broken, you've just been following a vice that was never designed for you. There's a better way and you're already on the path. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And if this episode hit home for you, I would be so grateful if you liked it and left a comment, and make sure you share it with a friend if you know someone who's struggling, because this conversation, more women need to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.